Through the years, I've had the opportunity to venture into some of the most incredible wilderness areas in search of the legendary cryptid known as Sasquatch. But getting to these areas is no easy feat, hiking for hours on end, days sometimes, facing the elements, the rain, the frigid winters, the perilous terrain. But it's all worth it for even the slightest chance of coming face to face with one of these creatures. Let's have a look back at some of these adventures in Volume 3 of Mountain Beast Mysteries, Bigfoot Beast of the North and Expedition Sasquatch. Like some of these, I don't know where they would have broken off from. What the f? There's another one. This is like the bottom of a tree. Like, where would this have broken off from? These are all standing trees with the top still on them. A big pile of them right here, just a pile. What is this? This could be like a nest or something. Like it's kind of flattened out right behind this thing, like a nest or an observation point or something where they could hide behind. All of these just broken. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like this.
Well, it's look what's happened in the past. Like it's really strange when it comes to the Bigfooting world. Everybody would love to be something more than they are. Okay, now if you know these Sasquatch are out there, and you know they're out there, you're basically on the precipice of fame that nobody could even imagine. Which is true.
It is.
And it can be intoxicating for some people. All I got to do is prove this and I'll be in the history books. You may as well be Neil Armstrong walking on the moon.
Could be bigger.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the thing is, there's a lot of people that want that so bad that they become obsessed. There's another guy, he's a biologist that used to work here, and after he had a few drinks, he used to clean all the bones for the government that are stored at the U of A. And he said basically they have Sasquatch. And
They have Sasquatch bones?
They have Sasquatch. He says, I'm not allowed to talk about them. There's things live in our forest. And I talked to some other guys, and they said, no, he mentioned Sasquatch. He said the word. And he was out hunting by himself, and he turned up dead.
This latest expedition into the valley is essentially a trial run for a larger expedition that I'm planning on doing into this area, just to kind of see what's feasible living out of a backpack. To be honest, I was pretty nervous going into this. I was alone. I was going to be extremely far from my vehicle, far from anybody. The hike to the location I wanted to be in was about 25 kilometers. So I was really putting myself in a vulnerable position. But over the years, after doing so many of these solo trips, I've kind of gotten used to the solitude, and I feel way more comfortable being in these remote wilderness areas, despite having Sasquatch on my mind. A creature that's thought by many to be something that's terrifying. Just here taking my first break on this trail. The trail starts off, it's like an ATV trail essentially, and it's like that for quite a ways, and then it goes down into the river, like the dried up riverbed, and there's going to be like a dozen more river crossings. This trail starts off like right at the start. You have to cross the stream and get your boots wet, and then there's a huge hill, and it's just muddy. And there's lots of mosquitoes, and it's really muggy out and humid, so it makes hiking with all this shit very, very difficult. I have a lot of gear, plus I'm carrying a dry bag full of food. And I don't even think I have enough food to last me very long out here. And now that I'm doing this, it's a lot of work. Muddy spot here on the trail, and you can see there's quite a few wolf tracks on it, so there are some dangerous animals around. There's wolves, there's a shit ton of bears in this area, and with any luck, Sasquatch. I think one of the things that keeps your mind at bay when it comes to fear on these trips is that a lot of the time, you're only thinking about how difficult it is hiking into these areas and carrying all this gear. Your mind is focused on the mission and getting to the location and how much it hurts physically to do these trips. So you're kind of preoccupied with that. Made it out of the trees. The worst part of the trail is over. I hate that part. Finally, at the creek in a more open area, feel a lot more comfortable here. Sort of get out of the bugs a little bit, I guess. onward to Ruby Mountain. I don't know how far I'm gonna make it. It's 3:30 right now in the afternoon, and it's gonna get dark out at like 8:30. So I might not make it all the way to the falls. Probably won't, unless I want to hike in the dark, which, you know, I might. But we will see. No strange activity as of yet. The Sasquatch reports that come out of this area describes encounters where the creatures are observing people as they move up the creek. The Sasquatch observe from the high banks and the ridges, and they watch as the people move through to Ruby Falls. You can see one of these high banks in the background here, and you can guarantee the whole time I was hiking, I was watching these banks and keeping my eyes open for any movement and to see if anything was watching me and following me. And if they were really good at it because I didn't see anything. It really makes hiking a lot easier when you have a water source the whole way. Walking up a creek, you have constant access to water. So you don't really have to carry it in your pack. If you're thirsty and you want to stop for a drink, you can just fill up your water bottle at pretty much any point and purify it using whatever means you have, whether it be chemicals or a filter system or even boiling it. Prior to this expedition, myself and a couple other members of the Alberta Sasquatch organization made a visit to one of my favorite people in the Bigfoot community, the world champion taxidermist and Bigfoot expert, Ken Walker. Ken is probably the most knowledgeable person that I know personally in the Bigfoot field. He's like a library of anecdotes. And he knows of all the encounters, all the historical encounters, all the encounters in Alberta, and all the encounters that are floating around the hunting and trapping community, because he's directly involved in those scenes. Ken hears stories from regular people, regular hunters, who don't know very much about the Sasquatch topic, and, you know, he's somebody that they can go to and share their stories with. He's a person that won't judge anybody and will listen to everything you have to say, despite how crazy it might sound.
There's just a lot of weird things going on. And he said all of a sudden one stepped out on the road. And he said, look, kind of. And he says, it wasn't a big one. He said, walk across the road. And he said, well, that's something I'm not going to tell anybody I saw. He said, at one point, there was a big female with a small young one, and the young one was so small it walked on all fours. And it walked out, and then another big female came out. And she had a juvenile with her that was limping, like it had been injured. And it was more like an adolescent, maybe not quite a teenager sort of thing. And it was walking on its hind legs. So it was two mature females with two children of different ages. No male, just that. But what it is whenever you find those great big tree structures, like, you know, you find a lot of the small ones, it sounds like that area is where they all gathered just before they went up into the mountains for the winter. Like a bunch of them would show up there. And that's why those tree structures are so big there. And that's why the area hasn't dried up. It's just that they're painfully aware that people are actually looking for them there. I says, I know a guy who's been in the woods for 50 years. He'll say he's seen two in his lifetime. And then I'll talk to another guy who's been in the woods for 50 years. He's seen two. Now I know about 4 of them, but it took 100 years of you guys being in the woods. The only thing we have over top of them is our ability to compile knowledge. That's the only way we will, like the BFRO database. It's brilliant. All the information is what you need. I wish they wouldn't hold much of it back, but they do. But the thing is, that's what we do because they run faster, they think faster, they're way stronger, they're prescient. They have one-on-one. Their advantage over us is so astronomical that it's almost comical. So if you're going to walk around in the woods, you know, and think you're fooling those things, the only person you're fooling is yourself. I make certain sounds, I go certain places, and I make sure that I'm easy to keep track of when I'm out there. We're daytime creatures.
Yeah.
And the Sasquatch is a nighttime creature. It has unbelievable night vision. Unbelievable. One of my friends was hunting in Alaska, and he asked about if they had any stories, the same trapper. She says, "You mean Bigfoot? He goes up in the mountains in the winter. He should be coming out any time." And and that's how it is. Like they all gather where those big tree structures are. They say, "Okay, Frank's here. I don't know where Bob is. Maybe something happened to him." They basically they gauge who's left, and then when the snows hit, they go. And then the big ones come out and they gather food and bring it back to the females and the smaller ones. Because the trapper says you will not see a small track or a medium track until March.
So they're in a cave or something.
Well, and then we found out there's a big cave up in there, and it's full of animal skeletons, like full.
Yeah.
And and like when I say a cave, they described it as not as big as the Cadman caves, but not a lot smaller. So that's a major cave. There's a lot of I forget how many undiscovered caves they think there is. A lot. And so you know, these guys all want to be the latest person to find a cave, but you got to be really careful because as soon as you discover a cave, like that one they call the Sarlacc pit. Did you hear about that one in BC? Well, when they came out and told everybody about it, the local native band claimed it and no one's allowed to go in it. Now, I would love to go there because it's a natural sinkhole. And if you're ever going to find a Sasquatch skeleton, that's where you're going to find it, on the bottom of that thing. Maybe even saber-tooths. You know, there's a lot of prehistoric animals in those things. So, I mean, you know, but right now they're not letting anybody explore it, they're not letting anybody do it. So you have to be real careful. If you find something like that, you have to kind of keep it quiet.
Finding this cave that Ken speaks about is one of the main objectives of my research in this area. Locating that cave could yield some substantial evidence, especially if it is indeed full of bones. If it's full of animal bones, maybe even Sasquatch bones, there could be physical or trace evidence left behind in or around that cave. The trouble is that this area is so vast, and it makes it extremely difficult for one person to locate a small cave entrance. And without having an exact location, it'd be like trying to find a needle in a haystack. After taking multiple breaks on this hike, I eventually made it to my first camp. And I had camped in this area before with Keenan from the Alberta Sasquatch organization. We didn't have anything strange happen. But this was where I was going to spend my first night because the hike was so long, and I would continue it the next day. So I finally made it to my camp for tonight. This is the same spot that me and Keenan hiked to and camped at like a year ago. And there's nobody here. I've been the only one on the trail. Haven't heard anything, haven't seen any wildlife other than like grouse. And I am exhausted. This hike is taxing. Like, very taxing. Losing daylight fast. It's getting pretty dark out now. And what you're seeing on camera is a pretty accurate representation of the darkness right now. With the ISO setting I have, it matches pretty much perfectly with how it actually looks in real life. And my body is just beat. What a long day. Doesn't look that bad on Google Earth when you look at the hike on Google, but in real life it's a completely different story. Before I got in the tent, I was using my night vision to kind of scan like across the river up on the ridge, because apparently that's where these creatures have been seen, is up on these ridges, like observing people as they come through the valley up the creek. So I did a scan, but I couldn't see anything strange. All is quiet tonight, other than the wind and the sound of the river. But hopefully nothing creepy approaches the tent. I did opt for the 12 gauge with the pistol grip. It just makes it really easy to maneuver inside the tent if I have to use it. Hopefully I don't have to use it, but at least I have something. So the mornings on this trip were quite cold and quite windy, and it made me just want to, get my stuff packed up and get moving as fast as possible, because I knew once I started moving, I would be warm. I would get warm, I'd get my blood flowing, and things would be fine, and I wouldn't have to worry about cold feet and cold hands. But I had another 2-hour push to my campsite at Ruby Falls, and after being completely exhausted from the previous day's hike, I was moving quite slow.
You know, they tested that and they didn't know what it was, and they weren't supposed to tell me.
You tested what?
The scat the frozen scat. It was inconclusive, and they wanted to know where I found it and circumstances. I said, "Are you willing to put into writing that it could be what I said it is?" He said, "No," and I said, "Well, what are we talking about then?"
Yeah, you're wasting it.
You know, I know what it is. You
Yeah.
don't want to believe me, or you don't want to admit that you know too. I really regret taking that sample into them, because you go into these stupid labs and they'll say, "We even tested hair that was purported to be Sasquatch, but it turned out to be buffalo." And I want to go in there and say, "What about my sample? Why don't you use my sample as an example?" Let me tell all the people here, I brought in Sasquatch DNA. I know it's Sasquatch DNA, and these people didn't know what it was. But there's another guy, he's a biologist that used to work here, and after he had a few drinks, he used to clean all the bones for the government that are stored at the U of A. And he said basically they have Sasquatch. And
They have Sasquatch bones?
they have Sasquatch. He said, "I'm not allowed to talk about them. There's things live in our forest." And I talked to some other guys, and they said, "No, he mentioned Sasquatch. He said the word." And he was out hunting by himself, and he turned up dead. But I mean, I knew, you know, and it was two very prominent policemen that introduced me to this guy. And then, of course, I know game ranchers that used to hear these stories. So I you know, he's gone now. I can't talk to him, but I really wish I could have, because he seemed to want to talk about it. So I tell people, when I tell them things, I says, I'm not telling you to believe me. I'm telling you to listen to me. Okay? Now, if you really are curious about this, research it yourself. Hear what I have to say, but don't take it as gospel. Just keep looking. And it gets to the point where, after you hear the same story 100, 200 times, you have to start thinking, wait a minute. Because I have people tell me, well, 90% of those stories can't be true. And I said, did you just come up with that number? I said, I'll tell you what, the people I talk to, from what I can gather and knowing people in my 58 years of existence, is that 99% of them are true. I said, if the odd one gets through that isn't true, I don't know about it. I said, because nobody has anything to gain by telling these stories, and if they were the kind of people, you'd already know they were a liar before they told you.
Yeah.
But the thing is, almost all of the people, they have everything to lose by telling you this stuff, you know. I knew he had a story because of the way he was acting, so I just kept on. And he said that finally he was on the Wapiti River, just by Grand Prairie there, and he was walking down the river, say 15 years old or something. He said he got a weird feeling, so he looked across the flat, and he said there was a big reddish brown colored bear. He called it a bear. And he says, as soon as I looked at it, he says it screamed and it charged me. Screamed. No bears don't scream. And he said that he fired 3 shots before it turned. And then he started to go white. Then he started to shake, and then he lost his composure. I had to sit with him for a bit. And he kept, like it was like PTSD.
You're reliving it, right?
It was, yeah. And he kept saying, I'll never go back there, I'll never go back. I said, at any time that this bear was coming towards you or running away, was it ever on all fours? And he just shook his head. But anyway, obviously they told him it was a bear, and that's how he recounted the story. But don't ever make fun of somebody. Listen to them. Listen to what they have to say. And just put it in the archives. All of a sudden something will pop up where you realize that person is telling the truth. Now I'll give you an example. Now, remember that one woman that she says she has that habituation? She's down in the States, I forget her name. And she says they used to unscrew the lid on her horse feed, eat it, and then they'd screw the lid back on. And everybody says she's crazy, she's lying and stuff like that. Anyway, she said, well, no, I can always tell when they did that because they'd leave 3 rocks on top of the horse feed. That stopped me in my tracks because that's what the trapper told me. Every time they robbed his track, they left 3 rocks on the top. And as soon as I read that, I realized this woman's telling the damn truth. I knew right away. Because this trapper would even begin to read anything somebody else had written online. I don't think he even has a computer. And how do you both tell the same story? It's too perfect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's gifting. It's gifting and it's gesture. So right away, I was inclined to believe that person. It's kind of like the pictures of the face in the window. Everybody's, you know, there's a debunking article right away. Well, I sent the picture to a guy who's actually seen one toe to toe while hunting. And he fires right back and says, yeah, that's one.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that image is burned into his face. And I mean, it's pretty specific when you look at that thing, you know, with the big flat nose. And also too, I can tell you right now, like if that's a model, he would have had to build a new one for every picture because the face is moving, the eye positions are different. And when you did see its eyes, they were those big, hollow black eyes that they describe, you know, in every description you read.
When you approach Ruby Falls, you really get a sense of how beautiful and amazing this place is and how unique it is. It's one of the most beautiful places in Alberta that I've hiked to. And when you come down that final stretch of trail through the trees and things open up, it's just an amazing feeling that you don't get too often. And it really boosts morale. If you're tired, if you're exhausted, and you feel like you don't really want to be there, when you see a view like that, it really brings you back up and gets you excited. It gets you excited to be there, and it gets you excited to explore. It gets you excited for the adventure. Even if you feel scared or if you feel lonely, it still manages to make you want to push forward and keep going. I completed the hike without having any strange activity. I didn't see anything weird. I didn't hear anything weird. And things seemed to be quite normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary that happened. And being alone, most of the time you're fine with that. Even if you want to find Sasquatch or evidence of Sasquatch. When you're doing a solo expedition, a lot of the times you're content with nothing happening, with nothing scary or creepy happening. Though how exciting would it be to come across a set of tracks, or to catch a glimpse of one of these creatures in the distance? It'd be a really special moment. The camp area at Ruby Falls is really nice because they had actually constructed really nice picnic tables there and fire pits. So it makes, living out in the wilderness a little bit easier. It is really nice to have luxuries like that. A place where you can sit, a place where you can make your food and just hang out. And you don't have to worry, about sitting in the dirt, sitting in the wet grass. It's a comfort that you wouldn't usually have in a backcountry hiking trip. Even though you want to get out into the deep wilderness, as far away from civilization as possible, it still is nice to have these little luxuries, and I for sure was not opposed to it. So I just did my nightly scan of the area around me with my night vision, and I haven't seen anything peculiar. No movement, no wildlife, no Bigfoot, nothing strange. So it's been a really cold day, really cold evening, very, very windy today. Like, I couldn't tell at any point which way the wind was blowing because it was just changing constantly. It was like I was in some sort of weird vortex. And a little bit of rain, just about snow, but mostly rain. And it looks like things are starting to clear up right now for the night, which is really nice. Hopefully I wake up with blue skies. We can get some solid exploring in. Aside from the wind, it's been another quiet night. No activity, no weird noises, nothing making its way into camp. Haven't seen any wildlife other than grouse and squirrels, which I find kind of odd. I thought for sure I would see something like a bear. Nothing as of yet. There are a lot of vantage points around me where these creatures can, observe me if they wanted to come in and do that. And I'm constantly watching the ridges and looking out for anything looking back at me. Hopefully these clouds clear and it gets sunny out. Today I'm just going to be exploring the valley, seeing if I can find anything strange or noteworthy or anything worth documenting. Hopefully, with any luck, we'll catch a glimpse of the Sasquatch. It's really nice to be able to get out and explore these areas and to see how much beauty is out there. We get caught up in city life sometimes and we kind of forget, what the real world is like, what nature is like. And this area really showcases nature's beauty. And I started off my exploration of this valley being pretty excited and curious and not really knowing what I was going to come across. And as far as the exploring goes, things were going good till I came across a really strange sight that for a while I could not explain, and it made me nervous, to be honest. And I thought this could be it. I could be closer than ever of discovering these Sasquatch creatures for myself, of actually seeing one. I had to try pretty hard to not let my nerves get the best of me. I was scared, nervous, and excited all at the same time. And my brain was jumping to all sorts of crazy conclusions. That one definitely didn't fall there. That was pulled out somewhere and either thrown or put there somehow. There's the root system, and the ground is more or less undisturbed. This is very weird. What the f***? There's another one. This is like the bottom of a tree. Like, where would this have broken off from? These are all standing trees with the top still on them. We could be heading into the den. Like, look at this. Where did that come from? Where did this break off from? This is broken and not chopped. But where did it fall from? These trees are all intact. A big pile of them right here, just a pile. What is this? This could be like a nest or something. Like, it's kind of flattened out right behind this thing, like a nest or an observation point or something where they could hide behind. all of these just broken. This is the weirdest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like this. Look at that. Where did that come from? Where did this big ass tree come from? Broken off. There's no stumps here. Like, some of these, I don't know where they would have broken off from. I initially thought, look at this. These are the tops. These are the tops of these trees. It's like they're connected at the end, at the bottom. How did that happen?
But have you seen the road that's on the other side of the car?
I think you were I was asking you about it before. You said there's more structures somewhere in the back there?
Yeah, like, and a handprint too, like where there's like a tree, it's a bird tree, it's like a tuning fork, and there's it's in Bigfoot, it's a really quick photograph of it. But what it did is it held the tree like this, and it pulled another tree down in the center, so it's caught like this. And I mean, you look at it and say, well, I could have just fallen there, until you realize there's nothing above it. There's no way it could have fallen. The only way it could have got there is to go up. So, but then when you realize that something with its right hand, because when you make a mark on a burnt tree, it doesn't go away. And you can see the mark where it held.
Uh-huh.
So, and then there's a lot of really small structures. There's 2 places in there where you can actually follow the structures on a trail.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time Aaron and I walked down there, we got 3 structures in, and I said, I'm not prepared to do this. I said, I haven't got my gun, for one thing. I said, and we haven't got proper cameras. We're following this trail, and it's obvious. Each time you find a structure, if you looked at where the trail is, just almost out of sight, you'd see another structure. So there was one big structure on the front of the road. I got a picture of me. When I went back there, because we'd followed the 3 in, they must have been watching us because they tore down the first structure. And the other thing too is somebody told me that if you find a high tree break and you follow the direction where the tree is pointing, you'll find another one. And they basically use those to stay off of the trails. They follow them. And that makes sense to me because I have followed them for a little bit and found other ones that way. But I've never put a whole bunch of time. When I go out where the Sasquatches are, I don't like to be too intrusive. Yeah. This was a guy found this way in Waterton. Bindernagel went crazy when we sent him this photograph. Right on a heavy used elk trail, it was a blind setup. And the guy said it was so eerie standing there looking at it that he finally had to leave. And somebody said, well, people made it. And he goes, no, we went through the middle of a nasty valley out of water. He said, where nobody would go. And he says, we found this thing. That was the first one we found. My trapper and I found it. I saw it from the back of his skidoo in the winter, and I said, we gotta go back. I know what this is. Because, I found these structures in there. If anybody made them, like if somebody said, well, somebody made them, the only person who would have made them would have been me. And I didn't make them, I found them. But the thing is, I've seen pictures of them on the internet, and I knew about the Sasquatch sightings in the area, but even the trapper wasn't aware that these were made by them. So this was something that I found in relation to the sightings.
Okay.
So, so if anybody made them, I did. But like even the trapper said when we looked at him, he said, you need heavy equipment to make some of these.
So I'm really wondering what the heck is going on here with these fallen trees, because it seems to be a narrow strip of trees going from one side of the creek all the way across to the other side. Just all knocked over and thrown around and tossed in random places, and like the bottoms of the trees up in the air with like nowhere for them to have come from. So like I'm pretty nervous right now because I'm alone. There's nobody else in this valley. I haven't heard any ATVs, nothing. So right now at this point, like going up this valley, I'm pretty nervous. I did pull out my shotgun just because it makes me feel a little bit better. And if anything wants to grab me and make a sequel to the Albert Ostman story, it might ward them off from doing that, hopefully. Because who knows, like, I was told they come to this area in the winter, and it's like late September now. So maybe they've moved through here, maybe they broke down all these trees in like, it's like a line. So maybe they did that to, you know, I guess scare people away. It's like a warning sign to stay out of this area. And if that's the case, I have crossed that boundary. I keep looking at these like ridges to see if anything's up there watching me. Haven't seen anything yet. Really gives me the creeps though. I'm gonna make my way up to where the fallen trees are up on the top of this area here. This is on the other side of the river as to where I was before. Maybe there's structures or something like that. Who knows? Who knows? You can see these white tips where it broke off. You can see them behind there. There's some more. This is really weird. Look at this. Just broken off. Okay, so after making my way up to the top here, and after doing some critical thinking, what this is starting to look like to me is an avalanche path. Pretty sure that's what it is. I mean, the breaks and stuff, they look pretty fresh, but this could have just happened this last winter. And you can see all the trees like pushed over. That's what it's starting to look like. You have a slope right behind me here. It looks a bit like, it looks to me to be the perfect angle, you know, to have an avalanche. So usually that between 37 and 39 degrees, that's the perfect angle for an avalanche. So is starting to look like that, and that would explain why there's branches and trees in places where there shouldn't be branches and trees. So I think I can let my guard down a bit more now and chill out a bit and push on into the valley. I was pretty nervous there for a bit. I'm like, what the hell could have done this? It must have been Sasquatch. It had to have been like a group of Sasquatch. But now I'm thinking it's probably most definitely an avalanche. So that's my conclusion anyways.
Though with most of this stuff, despite how weird it may seem, there's usually a more logical explanation. Looking at all the pushed over trees, you can tell that it was for sure an avalanche that did that. Pushed over the trees with such extreme force that it ripped some of them out of the ground by the roots and sent them up into the air, upside down, stuck in between other trees. It's just crazy how much force an avalanche can have, how much power to be able to do that. It was nice to be able to calm down and relax after coming to that conclusion. However, it was also kind of disappointing. It was exciting imagining that I was in a place where Sasquatch had come through and ripped the trees out of the ground and threw them all over the place and made little structures or nests. How fantastic would that be? But of course, that would have been too good to be true. This valley is so vast and desolate. I didn't see any forms of life while I was walking through that area. I had my shotgun at the ready, just in case I bumped into a bear. That was my main concern, was the bears, running into a grizzly bear, and knowing that I might have to fight it off somehow. But I didn't encounter anything like that. The valley was essentially lifeless other than myself and some birds and the plant life. I didn't see anything, and I expect to see Sasquatch in this area. This is where all the anecdotes and all the evidence point, is to this area. This is where I'm told they're supposed to be. So if the Sasquatch aren't around this area, then where are they? Are they somewhere else close by? Who knows? They could literally be anywhere. They could be constantly moving. With the valley being so open and vast, it would make sighting something the size of a Sasquatch very easy. You'd be able to see it from a mile away, and it would make recording it on video much less difficult than if it was in the deep bush.
Cypress Hills. A friend of mine outfits antelope down there, and they ended up, the fog rolled in, and so, you know, you can't hunt antelope in the fog. The hunter he was a doctor, he wanted to go for a drive. And so they went for a drive in the fog, and they ran into a big gray Sasquatch in the fog. They saw it twice. And they made fun of that guy, you know, and he was mad. He says, well, we saw it. And this was at Cypress Hills, and he said, but I asked that doctor, and I says, what did you guys really see? And he said he was a real laid back, calm kind of guy, and he says, well, about what he said is about what we saw. So yeah, so that guy, I think he works as a gunsmith down in Calgary. Whenever you're doing this setups, always take a dog with you. And the reason being is because they don't like dogs, because dogs, they sense the they communicate with electromagnetic energy, and I firmly believe the Sasquatch does too. And so the dog will pin them every time. The dog will freak out. And to the point where, and that's how I proved to Dan, who made the Bigfoot movie, because I do that AUDIOBOOK call, and I called at the thing there. 10 minutes later, there was a Sasquatch on that ridge, because the dog went nuts. And I told him, it's downwind. I said, come in downwind because it stank, you know. And I gave that one, and I didn't call too much. I just gave a couple of really quick calls so they don't really. Oh yeah.
Call.
That one. Yeah, you've heard it on the Sierra Sounds.
Yeah.
It's got that break in it. That's the one that I do. And I do it loud, but twice, real fast, because it'll catch them. Now they're waiting. Now if you do it again, it's the same as calling moose. They'll say, oh, that's not real, because now they're listening. You want to make sure that they hear it, but before they can listen, you say, well, I better check it out, because if he's not calling again, it could be Frank, he might be in trouble. The guy was sitting on a hill, 2 Sasquatch walked below, and he photographed them. These are good photos, actually. You see how it's got the bend at the shoulder? See the legs trailing far behind, and look how wide in the shoulders. I mean, those are Sasquatch. That looks exactly like Patty. And here's two other pictures, the same two. And it was just a hunter. And that guy wouldn't talk to me. I sent him a message, wouldn't talk to me. He was a Sasquatch thread. He put up 2 pictures, never put anything, no words, no nothing. That's an elbow. And this is a thigh. And this is also the daytime. You never got the picture at nighttime because they can see the infrared trigger. But in the daytime they can't. But he walked by the camera, and the camera woke up and got a picture of him just when he was almost past. The guy said, I don't know what this is, but it's walking up right. Oh, it's a bear. And he says, no, there's no bears in there. The farmer told me. So obviously it was along the riverway. This guy's name was Booney. He's a premier whitetail hunter. So he has cameras year round and things like that. So, you know, that one I think is, you know, is pretty good. This is that one that guy took at Edson, remember? Anyway, you got rocks thrown at him, eh? But you see, the younger ones have a narrow heel.
Oh yeah, then they get like a lot of them, like the juveniles, they have the massive toe splay too, right?
Yeah, this one here, like the guy said he got screamed and chased back to the car. And he never did make casts. You know, there's moose tracks here. He said they were about 13-inch long tracks. He says, but you couldn't match the stride. You know, it's funny because the one that I saw, south of Kidney Lake on the Blue Ridge Road, as far as I was concerned, I was looking at a man because I didn't believe. The guy with me asked me if it was a Sasquatch. He said, that's Sasquatch. I said, no, it has to be a man. No such thing as a Sasquatch. But this guy ran up a steep hill without slowing down. Even a bear can't do that. And it wasn't a big one. What I think happened was a big one crossed, and the young one held back, and then the young one got scared and ran when I drove home. Because it was only 6 foot tall maybe, but it moved like you know the Memorial Day footage where it runs across the field, that side of the mountain. That's exactly what I saw. Now,
why would you run with that kind of?
Well, it was.
Why would you be that scared?
That's what I wanted to know. Why are you scared? Why are you dressed all in black during bear season? And but then Don Brockman came by here one day and he said the loggers told me they're seeing Sasquatch at night pulling logs out of South of Kidney Lake. So I grabbed the map and I said, that's exactly where I saw mine. And he said, yeah, they're seeing him at night, and he says they weren't warned not to talk about the threat. And so when the people on the thing there were talking about out by Blue Ridge there, like if you go north of Kidney Lake, you'll hit the Freeman, and that's where Adrian Erickson told me, he said they're on that Freeman. And people see them on the highway, the Freeman River north of Kidney Lake, like by the Swan Hills. Mm-hmm. But if you go just north of that, you hit the highway going from Fort Assiniboine to Swan Hills. People always see them. There's so many deer. They see the Sasquatches there at night all the time. Like that's a hot spot for seeing them. Mm-hmm. But more of them get shot by hunters than you know. Well, Kip Kelly's dad, George Kelly, is famous. You know George Kelly?
No.
He's his brother shot when they were cone picking. He had the kids with him. Now the old guy's dead, but the kids are still alive, the cousins. And he turned around and there was a big Sasquatch standing with the kids. So he shot it, and it screamed, ran away. But he was terrified. You know, they always have an old beat up 303. You know. There's Sasquatch. There's the Patty. Oh, okay. This is the big cougar I was just throwing together.
Before we go, can you show us the crap?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I almost forgot.
We're freezing on top of it. I'll keep it cold. There it is. This is it. The last 2 bags of it.
Oh, that's cool.
Sasquatch shit. See, the snow is still in there.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What's that?
Justin better taste this.
You need it? It isn't like that.
No.
There's fine needles. I gave a bag of this to. And you know what he did? He thawed it out.
Really?
He thawed it out. I should never have given it to him.
Probably taste tested.
No, I said, you don't thaw it out. No, I need to thaw it out. I said, you don't thaw it out. I said, because the bacteria compromise it within 20 minutes and it's nothing. Then I may as well shit in the bag and give it to you. You know? Like, in all seriousness.
You probably should have done that.
So, he thawed it out. And like, no, right here, I sign out. Like, it's shit. You know, it needs an expert. Well, I guess he's at bullshit. That's a
I was at the ready all the time. I had my camcorder handy, and I was waiting, but at no point during my exploration did I see anything that resembled a Sasquatch. Despite not witnessing anything strange or finding any strange evidence, I will be returning to this valley for an extended stay, a longer expedition, to see if I can attract anything to my location. That seems to be the way to go. To not be constantly looking and searching, but to attract them to you, or to make them feel comfortable enough with you that they come in close and make their presence known.
Well, it's look what's happened in the past. Like it's really strange when it comes to the Bigfooting world. Everybody would love to be something more than they are. Okay, now if you know these Sasquatch are out there, you know they're out there. You're basically on the precipice of fame that nobody can even imagine. Which is true.
It is.
And it can be intoxicating for some people. All I got to do is prove this and I'll be in the history books. You may as well be Neil Armstrong walking on the moon.
Could be bigger.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the thing is, there's a lot of people that want that so bad that they become obsessed. I talked to one young hunter when he was young. He said a big one tried to grab him. He says he fired 3 shots to turn it. It ran across a clearing towards him screaming, and he was just a kid. He fired 3 shots, and he was visibly shaken just telling the story. Like he started to relive it.
They wait, half an hour goes by, nothing. And they say, okay, that's it, let's go to bed. Well, they go to bed, they just zip up the tent, get in their sleeping bags, when he said all hell breaks loose, almost right beside the tent, just in the bush. And he said it was comparable. He did an impression for me, and I instantly said to him, that sounded just like the Sierra sounds. It continued for a while, then it stopped, and then all of a sudden, an hour later, a rock gets thrown at the tent, like a pebble, but and he said it was just all night long till about 5 in the morning, when all of a sudden you could hear this thing just walk away.
There was one young child in Georgia, it's in the BFRO database, was returned to his parents many years ago when he was lost. And he said he would not have found his way out until, he said a large female being covered in hair picked him up, comforted him, and carried him back to his parents. I heard another story about a man fishing with his young daughter. She fell in the water, and one jumped out and put her back on the bank and ran away. But it put her on the wrong side of the river. So he had a heck of a time getting across to get her. So there's a lot of stories like that. I mean, just as much as you hear the bad ones, you can hear a few good ones if you look. If you look.
So this cast right here is a copy of Patty's Trackway from the Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. And this is one of the more famous tracks. This one was cast by Bob Titmus. Bob Titmus came on the scene after Patterson and Gimlin. Patterson thought to take cast, but he tried to get the best examples of the left and right foot. So this one was ignored because of this mark right here. This mark is what later became known as what Dr. Jeff Meldrum calls the mid-tarsal break. And that's where he believes there's a joint in the foot for flexibility between the heel and the front here. I can't remember the name of that part of the foot, but that's a copy of that one.
This is a recreation of a Sasquatch based on the measurements taken from the Patterson film stills. So basically what's in that film is what you see here. According to, I made my own measurement chart from the actual foot, and I compared it to John Green's, and it's the same. But this is basically, I've had a lot of witnesses come in and say this is what they look like, so it's been kind of a fun project. I also use this thing to smoke out potential witnesses. If they laugh at it, I know they've never seen one. If they get all weird and they walk away, then I know they've seen one, so then I can talk to them, right? So it's an icebreaker.
Just started my trek. I have way too much gear. Look at this. Minus 28 right now. Going uphill with about 80 pounds of gear. I just started this hike and I'm already finding these wolf tracks. They're coming down the trail. It looks like they chased an elk or something. Look at that. It's a big dog. Tell you what, I'm very glad I brought my 12 gauge with me. It's worth packing the extra weight, in my opinion. If I'm running into stuff like this already, who knows what's up at the top. So I was hiking up this hill and I came across this pre-made lean-to shelter, and that is a bingo, if I do say so myself. Saves me a lot of work. I didn't get as far as I wanted to go to today, just because I'm losing light fast and I don't want to get caught on the side of this mountain in the dark with no camp. So basically what I'm doing right now is gathering wood to make a fire. I want to get warm, I want to get all my gear thawed out and hunker in for the night, see if we can maybe lure something in here, see what we can attract. This is the real world. This is the world nobody thinks about when they're in the city. Everyone's all caught up in their lives and going to work and coming home from work and having dinner, going to bed and doing the same thing over again the next day and the next day and the next day. When you come out here to places like this to see, what the world is actually made of, you really get a sense of what it could be like to, have to survive in a place like this. Like if the Sasquatch exists, it has to survive out here. And it does it with no equipment. Like I have a bunch of gear. I can't imagine doing it with absolutely nothing. You really figure out what you're made of when you come out to places like this.
I've been into Sasquatch, research for about 10 years. My first interest in the subject, of course, started as a little kid. My grandpa had some old John Green books and I remember, looking through them in his basement and just kind of being quite intrigued by the whole notion of it. And that kind of continued into teenager years and stuff, but never to the point where I thought, I'm gonna go look for this thing. It was more like, say to my brother, hey, did you see the newest Sasquatch footage on the news? Or, hey, did you see the newest Loch Ness footage on the news? We were always kind of into that kind of stuff. I guess the mystery, right? Mystery really got me. So that's how I first kind of got into it. I guess I was kind of into it all my life, but then I don't know, one day I just started looking into it more, and I come across this organization in Western Canada, the Western Canadian Sasquatch Research Organization, or WCSRO for short. When I first got really involved and active in the actual search, was with the WCSRO and the main guy I really became friends with, Roman Forchek. He had a incident happen to him at Ram River Falls, right at the campground there. And that was actually kind of a hot spot about 10, 15 years ago. There seemed to be a lot of reports coming in. So he asked me to go out with him. He'd had this encounter the previous summer. And I said, sure, let's go. So we went out there. And we just happened to meet some other guys just from the WCSRO who just happened to be there, right? I mean, it was the hot spot, so people were going there. So we got talking to them and we went and sat by their fire and we were all sitting there. It was maybe 10 o'clock at night and we were just, BSing and whatnot. And out of the canyon, we heard this, I don't want to say a howl, but it was like a scream. you know, this really loud scream. And you know, I've spent quite a bit of time in the bush. Roman had, these other guys had, and all of us went, what the hell was that? Like, none of us could identify it right off the bat. So we were all sitting there kind of, ooh, what was that, you know? And then we sat there for about 20 minutes and Roman and myself said, well, we're gonna go back to our site and see what happens. So we left them at their site. The funny thing was they were with like their families and stuff. They weren't even there researching, they were just there camping. And so Roman and I went back to our site, and our site happened to be the very back ring of the campground, right up against the deep forest, and it was where he'd had his encounter. We were sitting there and we just had a really low fire going, and Roman thought, well, I'm gonna go let a few wood knocks off. So he walked out into the bush, 50 yards maybe, you know, whack, 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 3 times, sat down. We're sitting there talking, nothing happens. Maybe another 20 minutes goes by, half an hour. Well, let's try it again. So he goes out and he does this 3 or 4 times probably. And finally it's about 2 in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. There's not a soul around us. There's nobody in our ring. And there wasn't that many people in the campground overall. There was a few in the first ring where those other guys were, but not really much for people there. And he goes out, does another one, and it's like 2:30 in the morning, whack, whack, whack. He comes walking and he just comes to sit down beside me, and pretty deep into the deep forest we hear, you know, just a loud wood knock, you know, and we thought, I looked at him, I mean, the hair on my neck just went, and I looked at him, I said, did you hear that? And he, yeah, I heard that. So we listened and listened. And that was reminiscent of his previous encounter that he'd had in that site. So we waited another 20 minutes. Roman went out, knocked a few more times. Nothing else happened that night, you know. But just the fact that, I mean, this wasn't just a tree breaking or you know, it wasn't natural. It was a wood on wood, real poppy wood knock, you know, and it was probably, might have even been upwards of a couple hundred yards away, you know. But it was from deep in the forest there, like campgrounds behind us, it come from that way, right? And he'd had another experience too, where the previous summer, where him and his girlfriend at the time were in that same site, and he said there was like nobody else in the campground except for one set of people, and he said it was older man, well, looked like a grandpa, a son, and grandson. They were camping a little bit off the ring. They weren't in the same ring as Roman. I think they were in the next ring over. So him and his girlfriend were sitting there, and he was just kind of strumming guitar around the fire. He said same thing. He'd go out, do a wood knock or whatever, wait half an hour, come sit and talk. You know, nothing was happening. He said all of a sudden he hears this wood knock, and it comes from pretty far that way. And ooh, what was that, you know? So then they kind of quiet down and they wait, and then about half an hour goes by, and he goes out and he lets off a wood knock, comes back, and then all of a sudden he hears a wood knock from that direction, only it's closer. Okay, so they're talking amongst themselves really quietly, low fire. I think he's put the guitar away by this time, and he's like, okay, let's try it again. And he said his girlfriend's getting pretty freaked out at this point, but he goes out again, 3rd time, pop, but only it kind of went, first one was there, second one was there, 3rd one here, and a lot closer. And he said, like, oh my gosh, you know, and they're getting freaked out a bit, you know, but they wait, half an hour goes by, nothing. And they say, okay, that's it, let's go to bed. Well, they go to bed, they just zip up the tent, get in their sleeping bags, when he said all hell breaks loose, almost right beside the tent, just in the bush. And he said it was comparable. He did an impression for me, and I instantly said to him, that sounded just like the Sierra sounds. It continued for a while, then it stopped, and then all of a sudden, you know, an hour later, a rock gets thrown at the tent, like a pebble, but you know, and he said it was just all night long till about 5 in the morning, when all of a sudden you could hear this thing just walk away.
Well, I got my fire made, so staying warm won't be an issue, or shouldn't be. Still gotta go get more firewood though. I gotta gather enough to last the night. Don't want to freeze. Check it out. Pretty sweet. I'm just trying to thaw out my gear and some of my snacks. They're getting really hard. And the tripod head that I brought is really like frozen. I can't even like tilt it or pan it. So I'm trying to thaw that out too. But yeah, I have to make my bed, gather that firewood, and then I can settle in, maybe walk off, see if I can find any kind of evidence around here. Haven't heard anything yet. It's just dead quiet. So we'll see what happens. Basically the plan for tomorrow is to summit the mountain that I'm close to. I originally wanted to get a lot further today, but just didn't happen. So I'll make my base camp here, and later tonight I'll kind of go off exploring, see what I can find, see if I can hear any sounds, find some tracks maybe. And who knows, if I'm lucky enough, maybe something will be curious enough to come by. Who knows what the correct method is for, you know, luring in Sasquatch. Nobody knows for sure, it's all hearsay. Whoops work, whoops don't work, whistles work, whistles don't work. You know, everybody believes different things, and there's different groups that believe different things, but nobody knows for a fact what works the best, because Sasquatch is not 100% proven to be a real creature. It's pitch black out here. Like, I can't see a thing unless I turn my headlamp on. But it's super creepy out. And it's just an odd feeling being out here right now. I don't know what is around me. I wish I was just back in the lean-to at the fire, but gotta explore, see what I can find in the dark. Apparently, you know, they say Sasquatch is most likely a nocturnal being. And that makes sense, you know, for a creature that's trying to remain hidden from people. I'd be doing a lot of my moving around in the dark. You know, when humans are out and about and it's dark out, we take shelter somewhere. We don't like to be out at night. It's just against our natural instincts. We like to be somewhere where we feel safe, whether that be by the lean-to at the fire, or in a house or a cabin or whatever it is, you know. And this is just, this day and age almost feels unnatural being out in a place like this at night, because, you know, we're so used to being in a town or being in a big city where it's just, there's people everywhere. Even if things are going bad, like say there's like, I don't know, a person trying to hurt other people or some sort of attack, there's still good people around, and there's a community. So out here when you're alone, it's just you and your wits and your imagination and a 12 gauge, because you never know what's gonna sneak up on you. Could be a mountain lion, could be a wolf, could be a rogue Sasquatch that wants to cuddle with you at night, or, you know, eat you. I don't know. But it's actually like almost really hard to see where I'm going right now because it's so dark. I can, like, the stars and the moon reflect off the snow a bit, and that's kind of what I'm going off of. I guess I'm just looking for tracks, but mostly, like, because it's so quiet, any sort of sounds, that'll be key. Any sort of strange sounds, whether it be like trees falling, branches breaking, you know, things of that nature, or even like vocalizations or whistles or things like that. You know, it's very, very common now to hear like whistles, and apparently that's what they do, is whistle at you or whistle to each other. I know, like, Ron Moorhead's Bigfoot vocalizations, whenever I think of those and I'm out in a place like this, it just creeps me the hell out, because they are so unnatural sounding and just strange and bizarre. Never heard anything else like it. And if I heard that out here right now, I don't know what I'm gonna do. I might just freeze, I might run, who knows. Probably best to hold my ground if anything crazy happens.
So we went down to Elk Creek, further south there on the trunk road, and we went there in May, and it was pretty cold, and we ended up staying right at the campground. I don't know if you've been there. It's just one little ring, 9 sites, you know, you can see it all. And then the creek's down below, and they've actually got a fence around almost the whole campground. I don't know if it's to stop erosion down into the creek or what, but we were staying there, and we'd been checking out the creek and everything, and didn't see anything, hear anything. But then the next day I got looking, and we were walking by the creek, and all of a sudden I come across these, they were very clear, bare footprints, but they were maybe, you know, 8 to 10 inches long. Looked like a child's footprints, you know, but it was cold. It was May, and you know what May out there is like. I mean, it's not usually the warmest of seasons. And it was just a cold weekend. These were fresh, and I could not figure out what kind of kid would be walking around barefoot out there, you know. But again, I mean, it fell within human dimensions, so you can't just say, oh, that's a baby Sasquatch or a juvenile Sasquatch walking around, you know. It could have been a kid that just, you know, come to the campground with his dad or something and walked along the creek barefoot. But I did find it kind of strange, just timing. Like, there had still been a little bit of snow around there, and it was cold and windy and wet, and it just didn't seem like the greatest weather to be walking barefoot around the creek. So then we tried that spot a few more times, and it got quiet. And then I had a report come in on my website, and it was pretty new. It was filed end of May, and it was filed by an oil field worker who was driving north on the trunk road, and about 1 kilometer before the Brown Creek campground, he said one went across the road in front of him. He saw it, you know. It wasn't dark out. I think it was still light, when he saw it. And this had happened, when that report got filed, it had happened about 2-3 weeks before. So I thought, we got to get out there. You know, that's probably the newest report to ever come in. You know, lots of times I get reports in there from 1976 or 1982, or, you know, this was by far the freshest report that came in. So we decided, okay, let's go to Brown Creek and give it a try. I'd also read a thing on the Alberta Outdoorsman forum about, it was called, I think the thread was called Scary Night Near Nordegg. And it was about these two couples who stayed at the Brown Creek campground and had some high strangeness there, you know, like some unexplained animals come through or whatever. So I thought, okay, let's give Brown Creek a try. I had tried spent a lot of time south of Nordegg on the trunk road. I thought, let's try north. So we went to Brown Creek, and being as smart as I am, I forgot to look at the weather forecast. So we got there on the Friday and settled in, got camp set up. It was myself and my brother and another friend of mine. And it was really hot that day, probably, you know, almost 30. And we were playing in the creek and fishing and just, you know, I mean, half of Sasquatch research is just camping, right? And having fun. And that's part of the reason I do it, is just for the adventure, you know? And so the next day it started raining, and little did I know there was like a 50-millimeter rainfall warning in effect, and I never checked the weather. So it rained and it rained and it rained cats and dogs, and it went into the night, and so luckily we had tarps and everything set up, and again, if you know the Brown Creek campground, again, just one little circle, maybe 9 campsites in it. You can see them all from your own campsite. I mean, there's nobody else there. It's raining cats and dogs. And about 11 o'clock, my one friend said, I gotta call it a night. I'm tired, I'm going to bed. So he went to bed, went into the tent, and myself and my brother were still sitting there. And it was probably about 12:30, and I was just about to say to my brother, I gotta go to bed, I'm tired. But I hadn't quite said it yet. I was kind of humoring him. I think maybe he was, you know, having a beer or two or whatever, and we were just BSing. And I had this little metal camp table beside me, and all of a sudden, I mean, the rain on the tarp was deafening. It was so loud. But all of a sudden, something, I'm not exactly sure what, I'm pretty sure it was a rock, come in under my tarp, hit that metal table and went ping like that, and then flew off, and I think it hit the tent behind. And I took me a second to realize what happened, but in the meantime, my brother jumps up and says, was that a rock that just hit that table? And yeah, I think so. And he grabbed a spotlight and instantly spotlighted the direction we thought it come from. But whatever it was, it had to have come underneath our tarp, right? And our tarp was maybe 5 feet at its lowest point. So somehow this thing come under, hit the metal table and flew away. If it hadn't have hit that metal table, you would have never heard it. You know, a rock could have landed beside me and I'd never hear it between the noise on the tarp and stuff from the rain. So that one was really like what the heck was that, you know? So we thought, with this rain and the mud, there's gotta be some sort of evidence. So we got geared up and went looking in the rain, trudging around. We couldn't find any footprints. We didn't see anything. But again, just another really strange, how did that happen? What happened there, you know? So we went to Brown Creek quite a few times after that. I even met one of the camp kind of janitor guys who comes around to all the different camps and cleans them up and stuff. And I got talking to him, and he was from up at Hinton. And I said to him, this was the day after this happened. I said to him, yeah, we had something really strange happen last night. And he kind of gave me this look, and I said, we had a rock come flying into our camp last night. And he said, oh, doesn't surprise me. I said, why do you say that? And he said, well, I come and clean this campground, you know, every couple days or whatever. And he said, many times I've been here by myself, and you get that eerie feeling like you're not alone. And then he said, do you know how many times I've heard screams and all sorts of stuff come from across a creek up on the ridge there? He said, I've heard all sorts of stuff here that, you know, he didn't seem surprised at all, you know. And he said, he began to tell me about some of the other incidents he'd heard about, like, or seen. He said he was cleaning fire pits out. He said, walking on this trail, all of a sudden, there's this track, you know, just fresh as can be. He said, no doubt about it, it was a Sasquatch print. He said, nobody faked that, nobody, you know.
Well, heading further up the mountain, it's a lot warmer today actually than yesterday, a lot warmer, and there's a lot less snow the higher up I get. So I'll continue up this mountain and see what we can find, see if we can find any tracks or anything, or hear any strange noises. Got my crampons on, gives me lots of extra traction in the snow. Because I'm alone, I don't want to take any chances. I want to be a bit more sure-footed. Don't want to slip and hurt myself in any way, break an ankle, things of that nature. So crampons, good idea. Also got my mountain axe in case I have to arrest if I fall. Stop myself from sliding down the mountain. That peak, that's my destination, so I'm gonna head up there. It looks extremely windy and cold. You can see the snow blowing around up there. Look at this. This is insane. Made it to the top. I was worried it was going to be a false summit, but it was the actual summit. Take a look behind you. Just wilderness. Crazy.
Basically what I'm kind of doing right now is just using my long zoom lens to scan the landscape ahead and just to try and make out any movement in the trees. Like, I can't see anything with the naked eye from here, but this lens can zoom in very far, so really handy for scouting things that are really far away. And this little valley looks like the perfect habitat for Sasquatch, so I can't stay up here too long, unfortunately. The sun is gonna go past the mountain really soon, and I don't want to get caught up here in the dark. So I'm just gonna grab what shots I can, scan the landscape, and see what I can find.
For me, if this creature is real, first of all, I think it's flesh and blood. I don't think it's a paranormal type entity. I don't think there's I don't think it can switch dimensions. I don't think anything like that, right? I think this is a flesh and blood creature. I think it's probably a very rare creature. And I think it's a creature that doesn't want to be found. I don't think it wants, to be habituated. I don't think it wants that, Why does every Native American group in North America have a name for this? Why do they all know about it, they've been here a lot longer than we have. They know a lot more than we give them credit for, So this cast right here is a copy of Patty's Trackway from the Patterson-Gimlin film of 1967. And this is one of the more famous tracks. This one was cast by Bob Titmus. Bob Titmus came on the scene after Patterson and Gimlin. Patterson thought to take cast, but he tried to get the best examples of the left and right foot. So this one was ignored because of this mark right here. This mark is what later became known as what Dr. Jeff Meldrum calls the mid-tarsal break. And that's where he believes there's a joint in the foot for flexibility between the heel and the front here. I can't remember the name of that part of the foot, but that's a copy of that one. This one is probably like a third or fourth generation of the Patterson-Gimlin trackway. I think this is one of the better ones that Patterson had actually casted, simply because there wasn't that mark. It was just flat. It was a good representation of the left or right foot. This one being obviously the left foot. Looks right, but when you put it in the ground, it'd be left. And this one, again, is another Patterson-Gimlin trackway cast. This one was owned by the late Barry Blunt. He was a researcher in BC, and I acquired this from his wife after he passed away. And again, I think this is probably a second or third generation cast, but this one's in really good shape. But again, it was one of those ones that Patterson thought really represented the right foot quite well.
This is a recreation of a Sasquatch based on the measurements taken from the Patterson film stills. So basically what's in that film is what you see here. According to, I made my own measurement chart from the actual foot, and I compared it to John Green's, and it's the same. It's always been kind of a pet project of mine to try and recreate one. I'd like to work further on it. There's supposed to be trees on here and things like that, I'm not making any money on it, so I have to take time to work on it when I get it. But this is basically, I've had a lot of witnesses come in and say this is what they look like. So it's been kind of a fun project, you know. I also use this thing to smoke out potential witnesses, you know. If they laugh at it, I know they've never seen one. If they get all weird and they walk away, then I know they've seen one, so then I can talk to them, right? So it's an icebreaker. Having built the model from the Patterson photos, I think that a lot of the difference between the males and females physically is not much different than what you find in people. You know, if you look at Patty, and she was supposedly accompanied by 2 young ones. She has pendulous breasts, which is only hominids have those. She seems to be, you know, storing a bit of fat on the old glutes there, so she's, you know, basically looks like a middle-aged woman in a lot of ways. Now, the people I know who've seen the males, the big males, like one of my friends who's seen quite a few of them, he says the big ones, he says, you know, he says they're muscled up like you wouldn't believe. Like they are just prime specimens, like super Arnold Schwarzenegger on steroids type physiques on them. And like apparently it's really something to behold. Like they are so intimidating. They're just, you know, very much shoulders, you know, and narrower to the hips, you know, whereas Patty had the wide hips, you know. I mean, she looked like a female in a lot of ways if you look at the differences. So I think that, and the males are a lot bigger, a lot taller. You know, big tracks are like, you know, 19 inches long. And a friend who measured a tree said one with an 18 3/4 inch footprint was 9 feet 10 inches slouching. But the big ones slouch anyways. They have that almost like a humpback appearance. You can see the break in the back even on the Patterson footage. And then some of these little photographs that I have. When I look at photographs of Sasquatches, the rounded, the break to the shoulder is one of the first things I look for, you know. Not saying they don't straighten up like the Peguis tape where the one's looking up in the trees. But still, when that one looks up in the trees, you'll notice that the skin stretches from the chin to the throat. In other words, it doesn't normally have its head up, so everything stretches there. Normally it has its head down, and then its head set about intermediate between a gorilla and a human. You know, so the physical characteristics too is they tend to have like a shorter shin. When they bring their leg forward, their foot is longer, their shin is shorter, so their shin tends to be parallel to the ground when they bring their foot forward. You can't walk like that, but they do. It's right there in the film. But it's all that stuff is so subtle, and unless you've trained your eye, you don't really see it, unless it's pointed out to you. It looks like a man because it's on 2 legs, you know. Somebody finds a skull. They think it's a human skull because it looks human, somewhat human, or very human. They're not looking at the forehead saying, well, why isn't the forehead, you know, straight up? Why is the cranium sloped backwards, you know, things like that. You would have to be knowledgeable about skulls in order to pick that up right away. Show a Sasquatch track to a foot doctor and they will tell you that's not a human foot. There is no arch. They have a flat foot and they have a mid-tarsal break. But if you look at a true Sasquatch footprint, you'll notice the indentation is on the outside of the foot, whereas our arch is on the inside of ours because we have a fixed arch. And they have a mid-tarsal break, so the foot flexes in the middle. But almost always you'll notice there's an indentation to the outside of the track. The young ones have a narrow heel. I believe you found a track. I have no doubt that was very likely. It wasn't a bear track. I saw the picture of it. It's likely a Sasquatch track, and it wasn't a big one. You know, you find a 12-inch track, it'll have a narrow heel. You know, if you find a 15-inch track with a wide heel, it's likely female. You see? You find a 15-inch track with a narrow heel, it's likely a male, because it's still going to get bigger. But as they get bigger, their heels widen out, you know. But you know, the whole thing about talking like that is people have already made up their mind they don't exist, so they think you're just reaching up and pulling this stuff out of the air, you know.
I know sometimes I seem pretty skeptical, but sometimes I am, you know. I have to maintain that. I can't just believe every little thing I hear or every little theory or piece of information someone gives me, because a lot of different people tell me a lot of different things. And it's up to me to decide and to distinguish what is legitimate and what is plausible. It's up to you guys to do the same.
You can see behind me here, there's a tree break. I have to admit, I'm not huge on this tree break thing. I have seen weird tree structures, and you know, you'll find branch twisting and stranger things than just branch breaking. Like, it doesn't mean a whole lot to me. Apparently the Sasquatch will break branches at certain heights or whatever to mark their territory or to mark trails or to let you know that they're there. I can't buy that just because there are so many trees and broken trees and deadfall naturally that I personally just toss this stuff out. I don't know, unless I see something where it's like consistent, where the trees are snapped and it's one after the other and they're all perfectly at the same height and in the same direction, then I might start thinking, oh, okay, this is kind of weird. But when you find branches like this, I mean, this thing's like 8 feet, 8.5 feet tall. It's the right height, right, for a Sasquatch.
If you look through the history, everybody says, yeah, well, nobody knew what a Sasquatch was till those guys made those fake tracks. Other than the fact that Daniel Boone killed one in the 1700s, it's well documented. And I remember a historian, it was a woman, they were asking her if it was true that Daniel Boone killed a wild man of the forest. And she said if they exist, he killed one. It's documented well enough. There's a bunch of people there. Daniel Boone killed a Sasquatch. Look at in the 1930s or late 20s with Albert Ostman. His account, I have no doubt in my mind, no doubt that it's true. Now, the reason that I believe the Albert Ostman account is because, mostly because he was a Swede. That's gonna sound funny, but I lived in Norway for 5 years, and I've been dealing with Scandinavians through my outfitting business for like 15, 20 years. I speak Norwegian. You know, you get an old guard Scandinavian person, and they're not gonna lie to you. They're the most honest people you'll ever meet. You know, and they asked him on his deathbed, did that really happen? You know, make your peace with God, etc., etc. He said, yeah, it happened. Anybody who's followed the Iceman story from the Minnesota Iceman, apparently the man who owned that supposed Sasquatch that was in ice was a religious person, and he didn't want it being verified because it would go against the Bible. Now that makes sense for that time and that day and those people. That's an interesting story. I actually saw that when I was a kid when it came to Canada, and it was actually seized at the border because there was cracks in the ice and there's the smell of decaying flesh, so it was seized. And it was actually Walter Mondale, who ran for president from Minnesota, who was the guy who got it out of Hawk and let it carry on through its Canadian tour. Think about that for a minute, because it was a wealthy lawyer who apparently killed that Sasquatch in Minnesota. And then it was given to a team of scientists who released their findings, saying that it was a Neanderthal or some sort of a prehistoric man, and the owner had threatened, if they had done such a thing, to dump it in the ocean. It's an interesting story. I gotta pick up the book and read it. But I think that was a time when we were close to proving it. Somebody else who was going through letters in archives was able to find a letter that was sent to somebody, an American, who went on to the Sir Edmund Hillary's search for the Yeti. And the guy had a letter, the American, how to cover the story up or how to make sure that the information didn't get out if they did find one. And they likened it to what they're doing to the Sasquatch in North America. And which shows that letter was a great find. Shows that there was some sort of infiltration of the scientific community.
I got out here pretty late, like 3 p.m. and I didn't start building my shelter till, I don't know, like 4:30ish. And now it's dark out and it's creepy out. And usually when it gets dark out, it gets creepy out wherever you go. The history of Sasquatch in this Nordegg area is just insane. There are so many accounts way back to the early 1900s and before that. And, a lot of it goes on near the Forestry Trunk Road, off of the Forestry Trunk Road. And the crazy thing is that you don't have to be in a super remote area to have an experience. You can be in a campground. A lot of these things happen at campgrounds. They just walk right in and start messing with people. I think that's very interesting.
I talked to one young hunter when he was young. He said a big one tried to grab him. He says he fired 3 shots to turn it. It ran across a clearing towards him screaming. And he was just a kid. He fired 3 shots and he was visibly shaken just telling the story. Like he started to relive it. And I had to calm him down almost, And I think that was an interesting account because he was just a kid and he was on a river walk with his gun. And they have a creature watching him that reasons out that that's a young person, and I'll bet you they'll think he was just lost if I grab him. Because that's what would have happened. They would have said, oh, poor kid. We knew we shouldn't have let him go off on his own. He got himself lost. No. There's people in Alberta, backpackers, that backpack around the world. They didn't so much as find a matchstick from their backpack. Everything's gone, like just vanished, in areas where I know, well, the BFR will tell you there's Sasquatches in those areas. So, although I think that it's extremely rare, I think that they can be very dangerous. That being said, if you go through the anecdotes, there is a number of anecdotes where people were actually saved by them, which I also find very interesting. It shows a type of compassion. One hunter said he fell and broke his leg and a big one picked him up and carried him out and put him on the road. Now, I don't think that was compassion as much as he broke his leg a little too close to where that thing had his kids stashed. But young children, there was one young child in Georgia, it's in the BFRO database, was returned to his parents many, many, many years ago when he was lost. And he said he would not have found his way out until, he said a large female being covered in hair picked him up, comforted him, and carried him back to his parents. I heard another story about a man fishing with his young daughter. She fell in the water and one jumped out and put her back on the bank and ran away. But it put her on the wrong side of the river. So he had a heck of a time getting across to get her. So there's a lot of stories like that. I mean, just as much as you hear the bad ones, you can hear a few good ones if you look. If you look. I mean, there's people probably sitting there right now, how come I haven't heard any of the stories, right? Well, a lot of guys want to know why they haven't shot a giant deer too. That's because you're on the couch when I'm out in the bush, You gotta go to these things. If you look through the mountains of information on the Sasquatch subject, you'd be surprised what you'll find. And once you open your mind to it, and you're not going to chastise people, you'll be able to get accounts out of the odd person. At least that's been my experience. I've had people look at me real carefully when I ask them, and they're measuring on whether or not I'm going to believe them or if I'm pulling their leg. And once they realize I'm serious, it's amazing what comes out of people. A lot of people see them. Lots.
It was end of September, it was snowing, and I was in my outfitter tent with my brother, and then my friend Dave and his fiance were in their outfitter tent beside us. And it was about 3 a.m. probably, and my brother woke me up and he said, "Rob, did you hear that?" And I was in the middle of sleeping. I know what? He said, "I heard a knock. Actually, I've heard a few knocks." And I said, "Oh, well, okay." I kind of come to, and he said, "Just listen." So we were just sitting there listening, and all of a sudden, pop, there's a knock, and it's across a creek, but pretty close, and you can hear it. And my brother said, "Did you hear that?" And I went, "Yeah." So we listen, and about 2 minutes later, there's a knock, but now it's from completely different way behind us. He says, "Did you hear that?" "Yeah, of course I heard it." So now we're, sitting there just listening. So there's that knock, then that knock. Then a couple minutes later, another knock from that direction. And then a couple minutes later, another knock from that direction. So I heard 4 total knocks that night, and my brother heard 3. And they were all pretty close to camp, middle of the night. I mean, this is nobody's out there. This is the middle of nowhere. You've been to that area, you know how remote it is, But again, can I prove that it was a Sasquatch? No, Another time, again, I don't know, maybe I'll be there, nothing will happen, I pack up, and all of a sudden stuff starts to happen. Again, packed up, another time we're there, my friend and myself, and we go, I said, let's go pick up my trail cameras before we go. We'll go hike and go do that. So we go to cross a creek, and the creek is there's like a gully there where that creek is, and we just get down to jump over the creek when up above in that same area once again, we just hear, it sounds like somebody pushed a tree over, just crash, and holy cow, what was that? And we run up the side hill, look around, don't see anything, but it was just so pronounced, like an actual tree falling in the forest kind of thing, but we couldn't see anything that had been uprooted or moved or anything. There's just been lots of little things like that, just enough to keep your interest piqued, to keep you coming back. Again, like whistles in the middle of the night, I know there's owls and there's birds that will make noise in the middle of the night, but it always comes from that same area, and you hear at midnight, it gets your attention. What is that? Maybe it is just a bird, maybe it is some other animal, but enough to keep you interested, enough to keep you coming back for more, So I'm kind of addicted to that spot now after what's happened. And then there's the structures.
Yeah, tell me more about this.
Well, okay, I guess this spot, a little bit has to be explained. This spot is an old logging road it's a small branch off of a main road. Nobody, I don't think, really goes in there at all. It's a dead end road. There's a berm at the end. And as you're driving down the road, if you're paying close enough attention, the first one you see is on the left. These things are so intricate, like, you know, gigantic trees in a huge teepee style, but then you'll see a tree just completely hanging in the middle of it, balanced, not touching ground at all on either end, you know? And then you start trying to figure out, okay, if this tree fell on this one, okay, that might work. But then how did that one get woven in through there, you know, that kind of thing? So the first time I saw that first structure was the first time I went out there, and I was blown away by it. I thought, what did this? Now, could man have made it? I don't think me and you could go out there and just throw these together and make a structure, you know, especially the suspended. I mean, that thing had to weigh 200 or 300 pounds at least, and it's 10 feet in the air, you know.
It's very interesting with the tree structures, and I'll tell you my experience with it. I was already in an area looking for Sasquatches that my friends had taken me to when I spotted the first tree structure. Now, the only reason that I recognized it while we were skidooing past it was because of my research online. There was all of these tree structures from Florida to Alaska. The people, you know, researchers saying is you'll find these structures if you're in an area that has Sasquatches. Well, they basically correlated exactly. Like, the people who took me in there didn't find the tree structures. I did. I found those. And I took another fellow in there, and he knew a little bit about them as well, and we found a bunch more. And then I found another area out there with some amazing ones.
This location is very, very remote. Like, we are way out in the boonies right now. And by we, I mean you and me, because I'm alone. Apparently there's another one really close to the camp area. Yeah, that's weird. Very, very weird. Look. Made it to the camp. There's some benches and stuff and a fire pit that Rob made from the Alberta Sasquatch organization. Nice little campsite. Can finally relax, but I'm gonna walk down the road a bit right now. I still haven't had anything to eat, but I'm really excited because I did see another structure coming up here. And apparently somewhere close by is one that Rob actually made himself, just to see if it was possible. But I'm not sure where it is. I'd have to check the message he sent me. This location is exactly where apparently Jeff Meldrum had an encounter. The road is very muddy, so it's good for tracks. I'm keeping an eye open for tracks. All I see is horse hooves. There are wild horses all over this place. Here.
when you see the intricacies of these things, it's hard to just explain it off, snow loads and, that kind of stuff. Then there's another smaller structure to the right near the end of the road, which is where we always camp. It's more like a standing tree with some that are kind of, it almost looks like a lean-to in a sense. That one, I think people could have made that one. Did they? Who knows? There's some odder, smaller ones that definitely people could have made, and with the number of researchers that have been in there, maybe people did make them, but they look like they've been there for a long time too. That's another thing, like these structures look like they've been there for a decade or more, And then probably the most famous structure, it's another really intricate one. I wouldn't say the logs aren't quite as big as that first one, but again, you have this suspended log in the middle that like you could go play on the one end and it stays there, But some of these logs, it's not like, okay, here's the base, here's the tip of the tree, and it went like that. These things are actually flipped around so that the tip of the tree is in the ground and the base is up into the structure, How does that happen, Again, it's really hard to explain it away. And that one's even further into the trees and a little bit more hidden. Like if you were driving by, you might not necessarily see that one. And then quadding around the area and stuff, we found all sorts of possible structures. None quite as impressive as those two main structures, but all sorts of strange structures, all sorts of strange tree breaks. Like, again, I know tree breaks could easily be snow loads, could be a moose just trying to get up to the top of a small sapling and trying to get the green off the top or something, and it bowls it over and breaks it, But a lot of them are like, 6, 7, 8 feet, and it looks like something's just went snap, all sorts of that. There is also, which I found really strange, but again, it's on the side of the road, so maybe it was just placed like that. But there's 2 spots where you have upside down trees in the dirt, like roots are up top and it's upside down. And if you've ever read Robert Alley's book, Raincoast Sasquatch, about up in Alaska, about the upside down trees there, it's like that, but on a smaller scale. These aren't like, huge trees, they're, more like that.
They weren't lying when they said these things were really strange and hard to explain. They certainly are weird. Especially this far out. Like, yes, it's along a road. The road crew who built this road could have made them when they were clearing this out. All that logging equipment has incredibly strong hydraulic systems, and they could rip a tree out of the ground, spin it upside down, and jam it right into the soil if they wanted to. But I'm sure if a piece of equipment or machinery grabbed a log or a tree, there'd be evidence of it on the tree trunk. And these trees don't look very damaged at all. There's no way that was natural. There's no way this is natural. Check this out. This is some serious Blair Witch style shit. Like, they're really weaved in there in a weird way, though. Like, that's the bottom of that tree. The top is down there. But where did it fall from? None of these trees are broken. That's why I don't think it's natural. Something had to have made this. Now, there's two options. Bigfoot or people. And I've carried many logs in my firefighting career. Yeah, it's pretty... Yeah. This is a heavy one. And look, it doesn't look like it's grown here. It's like it was put here.
They're eerie. There's something strange about them. The hair on your neck just kind of goes up. So the majority of my research out there, that I've been doing, a lot of it is just taking apples, taking bananas, putting them on the structures and just, I guess, trying to gift them to whatever may be out there. And I used to always put cameras on the structures with the apples. And whenever I did that, nothing would happen. No apples would go missing, nothing would happen. I'd have them there for a weekend, nothing would happen. Have them there for extended stay when I'm there for a week, nothing would happen. The second I stopped putting cameras there, they disappeared. Whether it was apples, whether it was bananas, all of a sudden they're just gone, Or you go back the next day, check it out, and let's say you put 10 apples there, well, there's only 5 left. There's none on the ground. There's none that's rolled away. I know a lot of creatures could be responsible for that, but I found it really strange that whenever I had cameras, nothing would disappear, and as soon as I took the cameras off, something happened,
It's only going to take a body or a skull. A skull would work. I've talked to biologists about this, and they said you can, but you can't. You have to have one or the other, a whole body or a skull. A lot of these people will tell you the DNA came back human. Well, of course it did. If a chimpanzee is only like 2 turns from a human, imagine how close these guys are. They're a hominid. If you do just a basic test, it'll come out as human always. It has to. It's going to take a body, but it'd be a shame for somebody to kill one. But that being said, they get killed often. Or not often, but they do get killed. And they're usually either taken by their own kind or they're hidden, covered up. So if a person does find one, the last thing you want to do is offer anybody money for it. Get it out in the open. Get it to a news station. Get it into a situation where they can't cover it up.
I've never had a visual sighting. I've never seen a Sasquatch. Until I see one, I can't say, oh yeah, these creatures are real. I don't know that until. That's kind of, I guess, the main goal now is to see one for myself, to prove to myself that these are real, to prove I haven't been on a wild goose chase for 10 years, but even if I have, oh well. It's been fun. It's an adventure. It's a great way to just get outdoors, and I've always loved a mystery, so.
I have something to say about skeptical people too. It's no big deal. If you don't believe in something, that's your right. It's no big deal, okay? But if every time somebody brings up the subject, you have to say, oh no, they're not real. Oh no, they're not real, over and over again, you're not a skeptic, you're a narcissist. Because I heard you the first time. There's 2 types of people if you're investigating Sasquatch sightings, and that is people who've seen one and people who haven't, okay? People who haven't, people who have, right? And the last thing you need is all those people who haven't seen one making noise so you can't hear the one person that you should be listening to.